we're going live. This is like a whole thing. And I figured it out and I feel pretty proud of myself for doing that.
You should.
We'll talk about this, about how writers have to like learn technology. Um, my name is Betsy Chasse. I am a mom. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a writer. I'm now a writing coach. I'll be honest. I have a book out. It's called The Writer's Room, where I do a lot of unpacking of the publishing and writing and the whole industry in terms of how it all works at the back end and in terms of writing your own book and talking about story structure and things like that. Sorry, I got distracted. My dog. I'm here with full animals, so if you hear cats and dogs, this is like life. This is the real deal. So at first, I want to say thank you all for joining or watching later. I wanted to start this podcast because I work with a lot of writers who are writing books, and I noticed that there's a big distinction between sort of being a Substack writer, writing essays, which I think are amazing, and I love to write essays, and then the idea of writing a book, writing a complete piece. And it started when for me, really enjoying the reason Jen St. Germain is my first guest is because I started reading her book on Substack. And it was a blessing and a curse because I couldn't have it in my hand. Therefore, I couldn't stay up all night reading it. And I had to get patient because she releases her chapters twice a week. Um, but it was also gave me this anticipation, something to look forward to, something to go, oh, I get a chapter today. Like today, you released one of your chapters today. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack the world of writing your novel, fiction, nonfiction, um, educational, whatever it is, and how what that looks like and how we undertake that big of a project. So to start, I'm just super excited to have Jen here because Jen is I'm going to tell a little bit about you, and then you can tell more. But Jen is a traditionally published author. She's a self-published author, and she's currently publishing a really juicy, fun novel on Substack. So Jen, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into writing and all that fun stuff.
Well, like most writers that I know, I've always been a writer from the time I was a little kid. I still have the notebooks when I was like 8, and I wrote something called The Big Woods. Usually they were based on some Friday night scary movie that I'd seen. I basically cribbed off of that. But I always felt like I was a writer. I feel like that's in my DNA and I've always enjoyed it. But it took until I was quite a ways into life before I decided that I could tackle the idea of a novel. And I actually am a writer in my day job. I work at a university in public affairs, and I have been an editor and a writer in there for many, many years. But to write a novel, it just felt like this mountain, like only really special, important, talented people do that. I couldn't possibly do that. But then I happened to be off work at one point, and I wrote I wrote a novel. And I just started one day, and it, like some people, probably a lot of people, it started off as fairly autobiographical. You think you're writing a novel, but what you're really writing is, a memoir in your own way. But I had some fun with it. I stretched out and added a lot of comic things to it. And that became the first part of what ended up being a trilogy. But this novel, the first book, probably took me about 5 years to write. No, 3 years to write. And I went over it and over it and over it and over it. And that was my first foray into it. And it was to prove to myself that I could write a whole novel. Like I could go, and it wasn't a short story. It wasn't something at work. It was an entire novel, characters, creating a whole world.
And did
And
you get that one published? Is that the one that got
yeah,
published?
each one. It was a real evolution because I did the work, wrote it all, and then went through the process of querying. And as you know, querying is an art unto itself. It's researching what sorts of agents are, up your alley, and who's even accepting queries, how they want them, what you should send, all the formatting, all these things. And then you send it out, and then you sit back and you get shot down one at a
Ah,
time.
over. No, it's like a firing squad. And that
Yeah.
process, just to interrupt you, like, you did this when? Like, how many years ago now?
That was probably 2014.
Yeah. So that's when my first book got published, was in 2014. Um, but I luckily didn't I had the weight of a big movie behind me, so I didn't have to do the querying part. And
Yes.
I already had an agent because the movie had written a book, so I was lucky. I was very lucky with that. But even the querying that you were doing then is different than what it is now,
Yeah,
way.
I would absolutely believe that to be true. I had there was something on what was Twitter at the time, and it was like a hashtag, and I can't remember what the hashtag was called, but it was where you could sorry, just my screen went dark. You put a line or two about your book on this Twitter hashtag, and if agent liked it, they would they you would be asked to submit
Gosh,
some yeah.
imagine if it would be that easy today. Not that that
Well,
was easy, but could you imagine? Yeah,
I
you'd
had
get
a line from this New York agent, and I was so freaking happy. I was like
it.
dancing around, and oh my God, I was so excited. But the thing was, she asked me for, I don't know, the first 3 chapters, something like that, and then they asked me for something more, and then I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited longer. And in the end, I finally, like, something happened. "Oh, yeah, sorry. No, we're really not, gonna be able to do something with that." So that wasted a lot of time. And I had this brings me into kind of a more iffy part of publishing. So I went from that to talking to a friend of mine. It was a Canadian author, and I'm Canadian. So small pool. And this woman, she said, "Oh, well, you know what? Why don't you consider submitting it to my publisher because they're really good. I really think you're going to like them." I'm like, okay. So I I took the information, and I think I passed it along maybe through her, whatever. "Oh yeah, they're really interested and they wanted to take this on." And I said, "Well, what should I ask for?" Because I was so new to it. And I said, "Should I ask for some sort of, advance?" "Oh, no, 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 no. Like that's gonna make it work." So long and short was, it turned out that they signed me, they printed my book. I met the publisher in Toronto. They printed the book. My husband and I went up to meet her. I looked at the proof, and being in we did publishing in my office, and so I knew about fonts and leading and layouts and all that. And I'm like, this looks really squashed. Like, can't you, open up the font, the leading, the whatever. And oh no, no, this is what we had, because they were cheap. And
Yeah,
so they smushed everything into thin paper with a crappy, cover, and then said to me, "Now run with this and put on a launch, and this is what we're gonna do." So I don't know, they might have printed 500 copies. And I did all the legwork. I put on the launch. I got, stories in the newspaper, on radio, all of this.
yeah,
And then they wanted me to do 2 more books, and I started getting a funny feeling about them about a year in. Like, I just started feeling like, I don't know if I'm getting I don't know if it was a year. Oh, your pup does the same thing, Mike.
no, I'm talking to somebody was gonna walk behind me, but I'm on camera. So, I mean, you can walk behind me, but I'm live on Substack. So, go ahead, sorry.
So what happened was, I finally got tired of feeling that I was doing all the work and they were gonna make the money, and so I said, "You know what? I really think that I want my books back."
Yeah,
And oh, and they made me reset it too. Location, I had to redo the whole thing and set it in Ottawa instead of Windsor, so I did all of that. Oh, it's annoying.
yeah,
Anyway, and so she didn't want me to. And then I began to get a funny feeling. And it turned out, this is long and short, real long and short. The writer that I knew was the publisher.
Ah,
So she
well,
misrepresented herself as a writer when really she was the publisher.
I'm gonna just jump in here for a second and say so I, um how I ended up deciding that I was gonna write a book was, right around 2012, 2013, the self-publishing thing was becoming a thing. It wasn't quite a thing yet, and it wasn't cool, and it wasn't nearly what it is today, but I was doing a documentary for somebody who wanted to basically take the transcripts from the interviews that I had done with her and turn it into a book and self-publish it herself. And I was like, "Okay," and I had never done that, so I thought that was fascinating. Um, but I was really curious how the system works, so I decided to write a book of essays called Metanoia and do the self-publishing thing myself just to see how it worked. Because 'cause I'm that kind of person, like, I've always been very curious about new technology and new things, like, some of my films, like, I remember when we were doing What the Bleep. What the Bleep was shot half on film, so half digital, half analog, so I've always been on we've as we age, we end up being on the cusps of, like, the old way and the new way, and the old way of publishing was very, very rigid, you know, but it was different in that there was a time when a nobody author, a nobody writer that didn't have a platform, that wasn't famous in some way or an influencer, who was a really good writer, could get a book deal.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that little book and I published it myself. And somehow or another, I sold like 6,000 copies of the book.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing. So the agent that we had that represented us for our Bleep book was like, you should write a book. And I was like, well, okay, I'll write a book. And I came up with this book, Tipping Sacred Cows. And they got me a deal with Atria, Simon and Schuster. And Atria was an imprint that focused specifically on spirituality, wellness, self-help, those kinds of books. So I got this book deal and I did get an advance, which I thought was amazing. But then I realized, like you said, in my contract, I said, well, I need to have a publicist because I was sort of used to that's the way we did things. You hired a publicist. So I didn't know how to book myself on a TV show. And they gave me like some girl who was like fresh out of college, who had no contacts. But I was like, you know what? I can use this person. And I learned through her how to do the marketing. And this is something as authors, we're supposed to just be writers, right? We're supposed to just be good writers. But I was learning pretty quickly that the industry was changing and that if I was going to sell books, then I better learn how to do book marketing. And, you know, funny enough, the first printed copy of my book that I got after going through editorial and all the things, there was a typo on the very first page of my book.
Of course there was.
And I was like, this is Simon and how does this happen? But, what I learned from that experience was that publishers work in two tiers, really. They've got their bestseller, big, we're going to push these people tiers.
Yeah.
And then they have their little grinders. The little, like, if you sell 2 or 3,000 copies of the book and they have enough of those books out there, it's kind of like the money maker. It kind of makes the base
Yeah.
salary for everything. And they don't really care about you beyond that.
No.
If you pop, great. And I did get on some TV shows. I have no idea how many copies of that book had sold. It must have done okay. And it still sells today. And I think it's still relevant today.
Yeah.
But I got a real awakening into that space. And so when I went to go do my second book, Killing Buddha, went back to my agent, was going to get a book deal. They were like, well, you have to change this. Forgive me, don't forgive me. I don't really care. I use the word fuck a lot and I use it in my writing and I use it and right. And so they were like, well, you have to tone it down. You can't say this. You can't say that. And then I thought to myself, like you did, I'm like, why am I giving these people all of my money when I'm going to do all the marketing? They're going to have film rights. They're going to own all the stuff. And then I'm going to do all the work and I'm going to get like 40 to 60% of the book sales. And the way that royalties work, you don't get royalties till several months after. They do holdbacks based on returns. There's all this stuff, math that happens, and I don't even
Yeah.
love math. So
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. And I self-published Killing Buddha. And that was a whole different thing because when I did it myself, the first thing I looked into was just like you did. You know, we call them vanity presses or
Yeah. Yeah.
hybrid, right? They're
Yeah.
smaller presses. And I'm not going to disparage the whole industry because there are some good ones out there. But
Absolutely.
most of the ones that I've encountered are exactly as you described. They don't do what they say they're going to do. The quality of the books are not great,
No.
and you're kind of stuck into this world with them. And I've had to work with authors to get their books out
Let me
because,
tell you what they did.
yeah,
I researched this woman. It became like a mission. I'm like, I know this is the same person, and I started to really research, and it turned out that the writer that was my friend, I found out that she was the actual publisher, and so I went to a lawyer friend of my husband's, and I actually drafted a letter because they didn't want me to leave. They were like, "No, no, 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 no. We want you to." I'm like, I drafted a letter and I said that these were all the reasons why
mhm,
that I wanted to get out. But number one was you totally misrepresented yourself and acted as though you were not the person that I was negotiating with, whereas you really were, and you gave me poor advice. And because of that, I'm going to sue you. And I put it on the
good
letterhead of
for
my
you.
husband's lawyer. I
No wonder she told you not to ask for an advance, right? Like,
Right, exactly. I had an email that night because I tried to mail it, like, with, like, paid money and everything to get it, mailed and stick sign. They had a post box. They didn't even have an office.
mm,
So, I couldn't even get somebody to sign off on that they'd received this letter, so I put it all into an email. I had an answer a few hours later saying, "Sure, no problem, here's your release." And I said, "Take my book off of your website or I will sue," and I got all of it back. And I published the books 2 and 3 myself. I had graphic designers who are my friends, and so one of them agreed to design it for me, and, it was fantastic. It was a much better experience, and then I learned all about how to get it on Amazon and what to do there. And it was very exciting to put the novels up, and I had good feedback on them, but what I began to realize was unless you spent a lot of money
mhm,
publicizing, you didn't get anywhere because there are just so many books competing with yours every single day more.
right.
And there was people that I talked to who said they were basically lucky to break even at, and these were people who knew what they were doing. They were professional about it all. They had a good book and they just barely broke even. And I thought, the thing about being a writer is for most of us, we are introverts at heart. We start off writing because we like to be alone by ourselves in rooms typing or whatever.
Right.
So we are the last people who should be promoting our books. But
Yeah,
they push us out there and say, you got to do it. Or when we're in the position where we have to do it for ourselves because we're self publishing, it's a challenge. And to find that I was gonna have to do so much. I was gonna have to continue to harangue my friends and colleagues, "Here, buy my new book," or, "Tell somebody about it, please," or it just got to be I didn't wanna do it anymore. And
yeah,
so I wrote one more book before this one, that I'm doing on Substack, and I'm most proud of this book, and I dedicated it to my mom. At the time, she had cancer, and it was still, it was kind of a romantic comedy. It was a cool book, and I loved it. I put it on Amazon, and then I really didn't do much with it. So that's a book that I will probably find a home for on Substack,
yeah.
and as well as my other 3. I
See,
will probably update them.
I think that, when I work with clients, I get real clear with them in the beginning, like, what is your expectation? What do you expect to happen? And of course, we all harbor this fantasy that we're going to be on some sort of, Oprah and all these things. Well, maybe not Oprah anymore, but that's the hope. But it's a grind to publish a book,
Absolutely.
and part of it's frustrating. You look at the publishing industry, which is still, is in, I think, disarray because the the publishing industry, one of my clients right now is just got signed with an agent. She was very excited. And there's a publisher interested in publishing her second book. Then they came back to her and they said, well, just like you said, they're like, well, in order for us to do this deal, you have to get your social media numbers up. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what's going on in the publishing industry is they're just not taking any risks. They want to see that you have a big platform. If you have a big platform, then they'll publish your book. And then I think to myself, well, why do I need a publisher if I have a big platform? What's the point? And so the industries, and they're not looking so much for talent as they're looking for numbers. It's
Yeah.
totally a numbers game. And that's not a lie. But if you understand, like I have clients that are just like, I just want to write and publish my book. And if you can learn how to do a minimal amount of marketing, you go out and you do book events, and you're willing to get out of your house, which is tough for some writers. My one writer hates doing that. You'll do book sales. It's got to be patient, right? You have to be patient
Yeah.
with.
It's the same as when, you query and they say, like, there are people who put out, like, to 100 agents and there was the 101st, and you hear those stories about, famous authors who were rejected over and over and over again. And, it takes a tough gut to be able to do that. It
Yeah,
takes a really thick skin. And I think a lot of us writers, we're not the thick-skinned person. That's
right,
why we're alone in a room writing by ourselves, because
right.
if we had thick skin, we'd be out in the world.
Do
But,
you do you think now that you're putting this new book, that's amazing, by the way, anybody who's looking for like a juicy, super fun read, you get to read it twice a week. She gets 2 chapters a week. Um, but now you're publishing on Substack. I'm doing the same thing. I just was started to release my memoir. Now, my difference is I have a paid wall and then a non-paid wall. Like most of my essays, most of my snarky Betsy rants are free to anybody who, needs to be sarcastic and laugh. My memoir is behind a paywall. Yours isn't behind a paywall. How is that? How's it going there? How are you finding readers? What are you doing? Are you still having to do the marketing game? How's that working?
well, I started on Substack. Well, it was my second time actually starting it. I did it a few years back when it was Substack, the literary place to be.
Right.
And I kind of dropped off of it pretty quickly. I didn't really know what to do with it. But I used my last book, the one that I said I was really proud of, I put that out in 2020, and then due to things like COVID and my mom passing away and a lot of difficult things at work, I couldn't bring myself to write a book to completion. Um, I was going to make a sex, uh, joke there, but I won't. But anyway, I had ideas, but the biggest thing, the most daunting thing, wasn't only that I was suffering from depression, which is still a challenge. And, I'm always happy every day that I'm up and doing stuff, but that it's so much work. And you think, but what if nobody sees it? And that was the biggest thing. Why the hell would I go through all the work? And as an editor, trust me, I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And my husband says, stop editing. And I'm like, I can't. It's who I am.
Right.
But I I I finally, a friend of mine said, "Well, why don't you put your books on Substack?" And because last fall I decided I'd start again, but doing humor essays because they're short, and I figure, oh, I'll just put it out there, and it's a really dark world. Maybe there's a few people that like to laugh. In my heart, I believe people tend towards more dark subjects, actually. I think you made that point. When you write happy things, you don't get the same viewership as you get when you have a rant.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
true.
human nature. But I was hoping that I could put something out there that make people feel good and happy and laugh. And then after a few months of that, and one of my favorite posts that I did was, hey, I'm up to 18 subscribers and only 3/4 of them are people I'm related to.
That's always
Um,
the banger, right? Woo! I have people. I mean, I have to be honest. I have almost 2,000 subscribers on Substack. I have something like 4 or 5,000 followers. Sorry, my doggy's very excitable at the sounds of anything. Um, and it's like you said, sometimes I'll write, when I write one of my sassy, sarcastic, what's wrong with the world posts. I mean, I
yeah.
have a post right now that's probably got like 4,000 views, 5,000 reads. If I write something kind of introspective, maybe five or 600. And I think that's part of why it's hard to get the eyeballs,
Yeah.
because it's sort of the weight of the world right now, but it's also Substack. Substack, when you and I started in Substack, it was a literary space. It was a place designed for writers to share their work. And now to me, it's sort of like Facebook with some essays behind it. I mean, most people spend most of their time in the notes section. It's hard to get people to go and read. My open rate when I had about 1,000 subscribers and we didn't have even the notes, my open rate on my emails was significantly higher. And I know that it's annoying to get those emails, but I think unfortunately, just like in the publishing world, there's this algorithm, there's this need for like, we're only going to put eyeballs on people that get eyeballs, but the only way that you get eyeballs is to get it's like you're stuck in a real loop.
Yeah.
And that's why I really appreciate what you're doing, because what I love about what you're doing is, and this is what I think you have to do on places like Substack, is my whole memoir has been written for a while, and I was thinking about getting a publisher or publishing it myself. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put it on Substack. And because it's already been written, I'm doing a lot of cleanup because I'm a terrible, I have to edit better. But I just figured, it'll find who it finds. And I think that's the energy I think you have to put to it.
That's what I'm doing. I just decided it was really to prove to myself that I could write a novel again. And
Yeah.
so as a challenge to myself back, I think it was in May, I put out a post saying, I'm going to write a novel out loud. And I had an idea that I've been kicking around for about a year. And I took the first few chapters of it and played around with it some more. And then I launched, I think, the first maybe 5 chapters over the first maybe 3 weeks, because I was going to do it once a week. And then I thought it's too
Oh no, you can't do
long
that,
a
to me,
sprint.
girl. You
Yeah.
can't, you can't give me 1 chapter a week. You got to give me at least 2. It's so good. For those of you who aren't reading, what's it called? What's it
Well,
called?
accidents happen. And it's a darkly comic
It
love
is.
story, mystery. It's really hard to define, which is why it would be very difficult to query it, because they say, you've got to
Well, that's the
figure
other
out.
thing I like about like self-publishing and or doing this on Substack is like when you get into the publisher world, you need to fit in whatever box they want
Yeah,
you to
what
put it.
box is it?
You
It's
can't be like, yours is racy sometimes. I have to like sometimes remind myself, okay, there could be some seriously saucy language and some spicy things happening in this chapter. And I read usually in the morning, so I'm like, I gotta prepare myself because a couple times there's parts of them like, okay, I'm gonna read this later. Whoa,
oh
mama.
my God. I'll tell you, I have always hated the idea of writing a sex scene. I
You do it
don't read erotica.
so well.
It's like I just let the book go where it was going to go. It's like
Really good. It's just that
I
you
had
have
to
to
do the vocal for if I had to do the audio for this, I would die. And actually, I want to actually listen to whatever Substack's assigned to it. You can choose whatever you want. Like,
yeah, yeah.
read it. Like, I think that would be interesting to hear how Substack's
I
making it.
do like that tool on Substack that people can listen to your um essay, your chapters or your essays. But I think it's really about you just for me, I think what I appreciated was like this notion we get caught up in like how many people are reading and and I think just throwing it out and people will find it. Has it grown? Has your readership grown?
Yeah. Yeah, it has, and it's not massive, but like I said, I did it for myself, and I'm so happy. I'm probably 3/4 done. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I'm probably about 3/4 done, and it's been fun. The best part of it is this engagement with these readers who are so invested, and I love it. It's such a hit of dopamine when I look in the morning or during the day, the days that the chapters are published, and I see what people are saying. And I have a niece who emails me the funniest things about it, like she's got to go after that bitch and take care of this. Like, oh, calm down, Jessica, calm down. But that ability to engage with readers in real time,
Yeah.
that's huge. There's nothing else like that. Like, whatever, this book will live on Substack at some point. Maybe there'll be a really cheap paywall so that I can weed out people who are just trying to sell me things. Or like you
Yeah,
see people say, "Oh, I'm a beta reader. Would you like to use me?" I'm like, not really. I got to tell you, I don't do beta readers because I know the story I want to tell. And if it's crummy, people won't read it. If it's good, people will read it. But I'm not going to go through that whole process because I don't play well in big groups.
yeah,
So I'm not going to pretend that like I'm just not good on committees, things like that. I tell it like it is.
right.
People don't tend to like that.
Well, and I think the thing people have to understand, you know, publishing a book. I just wrote about this the other day because there's this person on Substack. I don't know how I ended up following them, but they're teaching a course about how to use AI to do all your art and
Yeah, I
everything,
saw your post on that. Yeah.
which really makes me insane. Because on one time they talked about how bad it is to use AI to write, but then I'm like, but wait, then you're just going to use AI to take away the designers and all the stuff all the other careers, you're just going to blow them off because you think you're special. But to publish a book realistically, if you want it to look good, and some people can do this cheaper, but I'm talking about hiring a professional editor, which I you must have. And it's important to have a
Yeah.
real editor. It's important to have an actual copy editor. To have the book, the interior of the book laid out properly for print, as well as for a proper ebook. So there's that. Then there's the cover design. Then there's purchasing the ISBNs. And yes, you can get all this stuff and cheap it out, but at a minimum, you're looking $7,500 to $10,000, and that includes a little bit of like marketing. In my book, I talk about ARCs, advanced reader copies, and ways that you can use Goodreads and places like that to generate buzz for your book. But if you don't have that, Substack is a really great way to just start getting your book out there.
It's
It's a great
super
way to
cool.
start.
Yeah, it's a super cool way to do it. And I love that I put images in of photos of 1930s movies and stuff.
Which you can't do in a printed book. I mean, you could, it's just more expensive. So
Yeah.
we had a question from somebody, which is, what is your favorite way to connect with your readers?
Well, I'll tell you, I like to like I'll look at comments and I will try to respond right away. I was thinking once I'm done this of maybe starting up a little chat. And if I did the idea of a cheap paywall, have a place where you could have people actually engaging with you, talking about what they liked, what they didn't like, I suppose. Although I can't promise you I'll pay any attention to that at all. Um, but a little room where you can talk with those readers.
Club.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I use that in a little post today saying, hey, join, Jen St. Germain's book club, because that's how I feel about this book, that it's brought together some really wonderful people into the thing that I love doing the most, which is writing. And it's people who appreciate you for what you're doing. And they tell you when have made them excited or, annoyed or whatever. And what else? There's
I
no other place you can do that.
I told Jen that she blew up my theory about her book this morning and she laughed at me. And I loved that about her because it's not that you didn't care, because I'm genuinely engaged in your book, but you're like, too bad, Betsy. You're just gonna have to read the book. And that's part of, I
Yeah.
think that's the thick skin part. I think, people come to me all the time and they'll say, well, you should write about this. And I'm like, well, no, you should write about that.
Yeah.
I mean, people but it was just so great the way you were like that. Too bad, Betsy. Suck it up, Buttercup. You're just gonna have to wait till the end of the book. And I was like,
Well, and that's the funny thing is, I was telling you about this other book that I just finished reading where the author pulled a last page, like
uh,
out of nowhere. Oh, that's the person who was the killer. And I was so annoyed because I like the readers to feel like they're smart enough to figure this out too. It might take you, I'm giving you little breadcrumbs here and there, but I don't want you to feel stupid at the end. Like, well, anybody could have pulled that, weird little fish out of nowhere and put it in and said, oh, well, yeah, that's what you would have never figured it out
yeah.
because you just didn't see it coming. And it wasn't a matter of, oh, she's so clever. It's, oh, she made me feel stupid. And I don't like that. I don't
Well,
like
and
that.
so
It's fun to think of how far can I make this go before you guys can't figure it out, and
Yeah.
you know,
So
that's my
to
goal.
so Lori, to answer your question for me, like I do a lot of engagement, but you know, it's hard to explain. But there's like I want people to read my stuff, of course. But I also realize that I don't care if people read my stuff. I want to make money off of Substack because I need to make money. Like everybody needs to make money. And I actually earn a living as a like my career is a writer. Like it's been a writer and a documentary filmmaker. And both of those industries are really struggling right now financially. So it's tight for me. So yeah, I like to earn money on Substack. I don't have a problem saying that out loud. I want people to become paid subscribers because I feel like at least the content that I'm delivering is quality enough that they would do that. So I don't lie about that, but I'm also aware that it's like a free for all on these platforms.
Yeah.
And like I closed down my chat. I used to have a chat open and I closed it down because it turned into a marketing tool for everybody else. And,
Mhm.
I have rules, for instance, like one of the rules that I do is genuine engagement. Like I don't go on anybody else's post and tell a link essays to my links or like
Yeah, that's not cool.
I don't do things like that. Like I try to be like polite and respectful. Well, I'm not always polite and respectful. Okay, that's a lie because I will go and comment on people's shit if it's bullshit. But beyond that, but I do actual engagement, and I find that when I do genuine engagement, that's when I get reciprocal responses. Um,
Yes.
but also, uh, you know, I have my book and I have the things that I'm writing that are behind a paywall or like my personal essays. But the other way is that I'm very in tune. This is the thing that's hard for writers, but because I was a documentary filmmaker and I learned early on that, in filmmaking, a lot of times you had to learn to market your stuff. So I had, and then going through tipping sacred cows and learning how to market. I figured out early on that if I'm going to get anywhere, I have to know how to do a little bit of marketing and I have to know what the temperature is and the platform that I'm posting on. So I know when I write some of my super sassy essays, they come from the heart. They're genuine. I have a notes app that's got thousands of ideas for essays on them. But I also am very aware that this topic is going to get me eyeballs. And I think as writers, we can have the things that we love to write, which I do. But if you're really thinking like I want to build my platform on Substack, I want to build my numbers on Substack, then you kind of have to be willing to play the game a little bit.
Yeah, I
So, and
agree.
I don't
And
think I try to play the game genuinely, but I'm still playing the game. And I think we all have to learn to do that a little more.
I think some of it's luck. I mean, you get like I did a comment on a lovely friend of mine's post, and her post went viral. So I keep seeing every day, oh, somebody liked your comment, and it was about her post about Theo of Golden. And I said, first of all, how she didn't like it. And I said, first of all, any book called Theo of Golden that's not about a retriever is just wrong. It's
That's awesome. Well,
gold.
I think Substack should pay us for viral notes. Like one of the things that I do appreciate about Medium, and I post a lot on Medium too, is that Medium seems slightly more democratic in that I like that like on Medium, you don't necessarily have to hustle for paid subscribers because everybody pays, I think it's $50 a year to be a member of Medium. And then when you read an article or an essay on Medium, they get it might be pennies, but at least that reader I didn't have to hustle. Somebody found my essay, they read it, I made 5 cents off of them. It's not a lot of money, but it feels a little bit more like I feel less like I have to hustle and play the game over there. Whereas in Substack, it's almost like a mud pit where we're all just throwing our shit in and fighting it out a little bit. And I
Yeah.
do appreciate the distinction between those two platforms that way.
Before I forget, first thing I want to say is when I saw the first essay that I happened to see of yours in my feed several months back, I was so blown away by the quality of your writing. And I just like I went right up and I signed up. I thought I want to see this and somebody that good, I want to pay them for that service. And so I've always, there's a few people on here that I can, support. And Nan, I know you're out there, and Nan Tepper and her work. But yours was just like, wow, you blew me away. I just love it. You spoke my language. Frequently it's blue, but that's okay.
Mhm.
I'm good with that. But yeah, I find that if you want to get people to look at you, write something about politics, write something about, I had a really bad thing. I used to think, well, if you're, ill, sometimes people tend to gravitate towards that. They tend to gravitate towards your worst days that you're writing about,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you tend to get attention on those days. And I wrote an essay about a month ago. I was having a terrible morning and I was just feeling so low, and so many lovely people
Yeah.
commented, and it's you don't want that. I don't want to live in that dark space all the time and put it out there. My Substack is a place where I want to have fun. I want to entertain people. But I mean, I do have essays on there in addition to my book. And so if I feel the real, like my book is taking all my creative thought right now because I didn't have it written in advance. I'm doing it on the go. But the essays, when I have something I really want to say, I have that option of putting that out there. So that's good. But it's almost calculated when you think, well, today's a good day to write about tariffs and how much,
It it's just tough because you get pigeonholed. That's one thing that's tough is like, I do choose topics that are near and dear to my heart and things that I know about. I spent a huge chunk of my life steeped pretty deeply in the spirituality and wellness industry. And, my book, Tipping Sacred Cows, was the beginning of unraveling some of that. Um, and so I know a lot about that. So I write about that. But I also made a choice of like, you know, I've been known for being very sassy, very snarky, very sarcastic. I overuse metaphors like a queen. Um, and and I figured, well, if I'm gonna write about this stuff, I might as well make people like laugh while we're doing it. Because I also believe like if we can't laugh at this point, we're all just gonna like bury our heads in the sand. But
yeah.
it does feel like there was a time like actually last month for like 2 weeks, I just didn't really publish anything. And then I published two or
Yeah.
three stories about like my tarantula story, which I think is
I love that story. I have told people that story. I love it. I love it. So funny.
but it was like crickets, and I just thought, this is the
I love
danger
it.
of when you kind of you get stuck in a world over there, and then nobody else can see what else you're doing. And so, I try to mix it up a little bit. But I think, being the other part of me is like I don't have all day long to spend on Substack reading and commenting. So because it's a job in and of itself. I know people that are doing that. They spend all day commenting and they're building their platforms, and that's a job in and of itself. And some of us just don't have that time. So, genuine engagement I think is key. And then I've come to the place where I wrote my tarantula story and I wrote my dolphin story, and I was like, that's what I wanted to think about that day,
And that's cool. I
you know?
think that's what you should do because you're not just writing for everybody else, you're writing for you. And yes, you're writing for income, but it feeds your soul
Yeah.
as well. And I think that if we only write things that are going to get eyeballs, it will suck the lives out of us. And I can't do that. I had a terrible weekend because of all this stuff that happened to do with tariffs and my prime minister telling everybody walk away. And I'm like, works for me. I'd marry him if I wasn't already married.
Mhm.
But it really can drown you in this darkness, and I have to, like, do something else, and so for me, it's living in the world that I'm creating on Substack, and it's maybe, like I said, creating a little spot where I can be with the people who wanna read that, and we can laugh about, who they think the killer is or is there,
Mhm.
like, that's my safe place, and I'm not on any other social media. I had like 25,000 Twitter followers at one point. I cobbled it together a bit at a time, but then you begin to realize it's all just other authors trying to get you to buy their stuff, or it's bots. And at first I was like being very diligent about winnowing out the crap, but then it's like I just don't even care. And one day I just deleted it. I'm one of those scorched earth policy people. When I'm done, I'm done. So I
Yeah.
got rid. And then you hear, publishers who are like, well, we want you to have a following. Well, it's like, what's the point? It's going to be people who, the same group that's going to be interested. And then everybody else who's just flipping through and flipping through and flipping through. And they get people who know you get really tired of you trying to sell to them.
Yeah, and
And
that's the thing that's exhausting is, like, trying to promote and sell because y you're right, like, at one point, I had, like, 700 and something thousand followers on Facebook.
show off.
No, I'm telling you probably 30% of those were bots, I'm sure of it, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
at least and then the other people hit like one time, right?
Yeah.
And then never came back again, and so this whole it's just this false reality, which is
I'd rather
why
keep it small and real. I
yeah,
really
that's what I said. I'd
nothing more
rather
than
when I talk to my clients and we talk about getting their book out in the world, and I help them write letters to podcasts to be on podcasts. And they'll go, well, that's a really small podcast. It seems like it doesn't have very many listeners. And I'd go, you know what? I'd rather be on that podcast with their 100 listeners than that podcast with a million listeners because those 100 listeners are committed. And I bet you will sell 50 books on that podcast and you might sell five on the big one because it's really about people that are committed to listening and being interested and actually engaging. And so I'd rather look at places where people are actually doing that for real as
yeah,
opposed
I
to
think that it's that genuine feeling that people really are invested in what you're doing. There's nothing like it. It's
yeah.
like I'm lucky because I don't write to live. Like I don't have to make, an income off of that to support myself. If I did, I would be hustling my ass off all the time. I would be day and night. It would be my job. And I would do it. I would make it happen. I've stood in bookstores and my husband has a print shop. So I've had really nice professional looking, banners and that. And it is hard to do. But if I had to feed my family with it, I would be doing it
Well,
and making it happen. But
I think
people
it's
have
also I think it's also really important for writers. I have no shame apparently because on the bottom of my essays, I do a call to action that says, "Here's my Venmo or become
yeah,
a paid subscriber." I don't think writers should have a problem asking for money. I saw this post one day from this guy and went off on him. He's like, "I'm sick of writers asking for money,
God
and who do
forbid.
you think you are? Like, if you don't have good work, if you were a good writer, you'd be getting paid." And I'm like, "Excuse me."
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sick of angry old white men like you who are a shitty writer, and you're probably writing this because you need to get attention so that you can get paid. So get over yourself. But I think writers should start speaking up and saying, if you read this, because part of this post that I wrote yesterday about AI, it's like there's this subconscious belief that creatives don't deserve to get paid. And that when I mean, if I could afford it, I would pay everybody all the time. I try every month to like send Venmos to certain essays that I've read. Like in my budget, I spend $50 a month just sending $5 to other writers if I can, because $5 in a Venmo tip jar is meaningful to these writers. And it not only is it $5 that means they might be able to buy toilet paper, but it also is validation, that hey,
absolutely.
somebody read my shit. And I
Yeah,
think writers should be okay with that. I think you
yeah,
should stand up and say, hey, if this meant something to you, I'd love a tip. Because we need to change the mentality. Just like we need to say, hey, you know what, if you're looking at a piece of like for me, I'll admit it. Early on, I used a few AI images with some of my posts, and then I was like, I can't be doing this. This is terrible. So now I either go find an artist that I love their work, and I ask them. I say, hey, listen, I can't pay you, but I will put a link if it's a print or they can buy it.
okay. Yeah,
So at least if I put an image that's a piece of a painting or something that belongs to a painter, I will share their link and say, hey, if you like this painting, drop them a Venmo. If
yeah,
this, you know, because this is how we have to start supporting each other. And I think it goes back to the writers are not the best at promoting themselves and everything feels icky.
yeah.
And so make it feel less icky by knowing that your work is valuable.
I think that all goes back to imposter syndrome, which probably almost every writer has.
Right.
He's gonna wanna pay me just because I spent thousands of hours on this. They're gonna want
Or
to.
thinking about it, or even if you spent 2 hours writing it, time doesn't matter. It's like it's important, I think, yeah, the imposter
Yeah,
syndrome.
all of that. And I think that one of the things that drove me crazy about, publishing on Amazon was the strategy. Do you have one, you're like, I have a trilogy, right? So did I have my first book free or 99 cents and then have the other two at full price? Should you just put them at full price? Because if you don't, then does it look like your book's, crappy? It's,
Eh,
you,
I'm
you
gonna
never
blow your mind.
do.
I mean, I let my authors put their books up on Amazon, but I don't buy things from Amazon. I stopped shopping at Amazon because people don't understand, for instance, if you publish through Ingram Spark, or even if you publish through Amazon. Well, if you publish through Amazon, it's slightly better, but then your book is only available on Amazon. Whereas if
Yeah.
you publish through like Ingram Spark or Digital to Press or Lumom or whatever, Lulu or whatever it is, some of these places, um, Amazon gets a preferred discount when they buy your book. That's why Amazon's constantly changing the prices of books because they go to Ingram and say, "Hey, instead of paying 55%, we want to get a 70% discount on this book this week." And you don't, as an author, have no say on that. And so I use bookshop.org, which is a nonprofit online bookstore where I have a little bookstore and you can buy your books there. And at least when you buy a book from bookshop.org, at least I think it's 10% of your purchase goes to the independent bookstore of your choice. So there's one way to at least contribute to independent bookstores. The other thing I do is I sell my books directly off my website. You know, people, I think I'd rather start somebody say to me, "Oh, I don't want to buy this book off. I'd rather buy it off Amazon." Why? Amazon is like a horrible company.
Oh,
And when
yeah.
you buy the book directly
Let's
from
use you.
yeah, when you buy the book directly from the writer, they get the more of the money for it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
try to, it's not as sexy because everybody wants to call themselves an Amazon bestseller. I'm gonna like burst the Amazon and we'll wrap this up and I'm gonna give you guys this tidbit. Here is the Amazon bestseller secret that nobody wants you to know. Here's how you become an Amazon bestseller. On one day, get either you do it or find people to do it for you, sell 100 books in 1 hour. You will instantly become an Amazon bestseller because that's all they count. And then you can say, I'm an Amazon bestseller. That's it. That's the math. It's not based on anything other than the number of books sold in that hour.
Yeah.
So, and then people will say, hey, I'm an Amazon bestseller. It doesn't even matter because readers don't really care.
No,
You know,
it's what's being promoted and whatever catches their eye that day. Somebody told them about something. My books
yeah,
aren't currently up there, and I despise, Bezos. So I don't know if they ever will be up there. I might just keep them on Substack and a website, and that's about it
yeah,
because I feel I'd rather make less and have power over my own
absolutely.
creativity, my own IP, and not give it away to somebody who oh no, I can't do that.
Yeah. So if you were going to give, so if you were going to give writers who were thinking about writing that novel, writing their memoir, what would you say to them? What would one piece of advice you might want to throw out to them?
Well, it'd be two different things because the biggest piece of advice I can give for writing a novel is this time around to make myself finally put the pedal to the metal and do it after not feeling that I could do it for about 5 years. It'd been so long since I'd written. I just felt like I couldn't. I'd lose interest after a few, 4 or 5 chapters. Is to actually have the overview done a bit, like the plot outline, where you have an idea of where you want it to go. You can change some things along the way, but have some fun with it. Decide who your main characters are. Do a little research on them so that they become people in your head, and they can kind of once you do that, they can help drive the car with you sometimes because in my novel that I'm doing right now, I'm finding, wow, I never really put the perspective of this character out there. And they really would have felt like maybe this, like the chapter today that I did. I'm thinking, yeah, PTSD didn't even really talk about that with this poor man and what he saw, what he witnessed, what he went through. I'm
Right.
thinking, that what a great place for it to all come and hit him all at once
Yeah.
on the one of the largest stages in the entire world. I thought that's a great place to have a panic attack. Let's do that. And
Yeah.
so it came from I had no plans to do it. But when I started thinking it through, looking at where I wanted to go in the next few chapters so that I could put that in there and it won't screw up anything coming, after that. So that was cool. In terms of a memoir, I haven't written them. I'm one of those people who thinks, well, what am I going to say? I'm not brave enough to write a memoir. Because
Let me
I'm
ask you this
afraid of
question.
hurting people's feelings. Yeah.
Do you generally have an idea of where your book is going?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And
Yeah,
but
I have the ending that I see. I can see that. I know my destination. I'm having fun with trying to throw off the readers a little bit
and
so
so
that
the
they
plot's pretty
don't get bored otherwise.
outlined out.
Pardon?
But the plot is basically outlined out. I watched this really interesting interview with George R.R. Tolkien. And he or not Tolkien, George, oh my God, the guy that wrote Game of Thrones, whose name I just got all confused. Um, and he basically said that he came up with the idea for the Game of Thrones because was sitting there thinking about what a snow wolf would look like. And so he came up with the character, the snow wolves, the dire wolves first, and then all these people that had dire wolves. And then he started writing one of the stories, but then he stopped because he realized that if he didn't go back and build all the worlds and build all the family trees and do all of that first, he would just make a mess of it.
Yeah.
Um, in doing that, he created really intimate relationships with his main characters, and that's what I'm hearing you say you do. You've like an intimate relationship with your at least two
It's
main characters.
yeah, it's so wild when I'm writing and I really make myself sit down. And that's the hardest thing for writers to do. Like for me, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'd rather just, scroll or do this, but the internet's so depressing that I will sit there and I will make myself write and I'll be in my head and I'll see all of it happening. It's like this whole world. And it's so weird when you think that's what writers do. I can see it happening. I can see the town where things are happening. I see the house that I chose a house that I saw online for my main character to live in, and then I can describe it. And it's all in my head while I'm writing. And to make yourself sit down and do the work of plotting it out to a degree, that maybe some people are more comfortable with every chapter. They've got to know, what is going to happen. I on Substack, I keep doing drafts of chapters, like I was at like 15 through 30. And it kept changing because I would add in another chapter. I would go down a different road and it was more interesting. So now I kind of just sit. I have my basic overview and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to that. But first I'm going to, do this. But I always know I can look at that overview, that plot outline and know this is where I need to end up. So there may be some little side trips that'll be fun, but I know where I'm gonna end up. And making myself sit down and do that plot, that structure was the key for me to keep going with this because otherwise I would have just lost interest partway through thinking, oh, what am I going to do next?
Right.
And I would have just given up.
And your chapters, are you finding that your chapters on Substack are shorter? You see, I pre-wrote my memoir that I'm doing on Substack right now. I already wrote, so it's typical book 3,000-ish words.
Yeah.
Um, but yours are much shorter. So are you doing that intentionally or is that just how
Yeah,
it's
I don't like for me, I just kind of didn't think that on the web that people would be, or especially on phones, people
yeah.
would be as interested in long, long chapters. And so I found that, yeah, I mean, I could pad them if I really wanted to hit a certain number, like word count or something, but I kind of let the chapter dictate where what the length's going to be. And sometimes like I've done this thing where I put like in a few chapters, there's like 4 different viewpoints in it. And I have some fun with that. Um, but the chapters make sense to me. There's certain things I want to get across, a certain feeling I want to hit. And once I've gotten that, yeah, I mean, I'm just, it doesn't have to be 3,000 words or 1,500 or 20. I have no idea what my chapter lengths are. When I'm done all this, I'll probably collect all the chapters and put it all out just to see what it would come out to. But I mean,
Yeah.
I don't expect this is going to be a 120,000 word book. And I tend to write quick. I tend to write things that you read them and you just go through it. It's not like, oh, what did she mean there? I got to go back and check. I don't like
Yeah.
having to do that, so I like it to kind of just take you along.
And you do have a really clever way, which I think is great for Substack, of using images to tell the story as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun with that. Certain things I just I put little clues out there sometimes that are hidden in images and people might think of it later. But yeah, it's just because this is a whole different way to do a book. And it's really a way to unlock your creativity when you can. It's like the world's your oyster with this. You could have links to something. I think I had a link to "Don't Stand So Close to Me," the police video in one
Yeah,
of
you did. I saw it. I remember that. Yeah, you can have a lot more fun with
them.
these times. A little bit more interactive. And you're
Yeah,
right. I do enjoy being able to read it and comment right afterward, and then you comment right back. So there's
yeah,
like the instant engagement and gratification because it's fun.
yeah.
And so that's
I think
great.
I think
So
people like that.
follow Jen. It's Jen St. Germain, and her book is called Accidents Happen, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And she also has some other wonderful essays. I invite everybody to go and subscribe to her. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my very first, like, I don't know if they call this a podcast, a live video, whatever it is. This is my writer's room. And each Tuesday, I will be talking to different authors who are published traditionally, self-published, and or doing stuff on Substack just to really explore their experience, their process. And I hope you guys will keep joining. And I hope if you're not a subscriber of mine, you will become a subscriber of mine. I always have Venmo on the bottom of my essays because this is how I eat, believe it or not. And your support it keeps me going. And I just really appreciate you, Jenna. I love, love, love your book. And now that it's already Tuesday, they come out Tuesday and Friday. So now I have to wait till Friday.
Yeah, I have to write it still the next 2 Like,
Yeah.
this took up today. I hope you're happy.
I
And I'm
loved it.
scared and I don't like it.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, everybody, and have a fabulous rest of your week. Get out there and write. Bye.
Alrighty.